What is a gut feeling you had that turned out to be 100 accurate, even though it made no logical sense at the time? My wife and I were driving home from the cinema one hot afternoon. About 15 minutes in, she told me to stop driving and find somewhere to stop immediately. Asked her what was wrong, but she didn't know either. She just said there's something wrong with our car. Stopped the car, and we got out to check. Nothing seemed off, but she was adamant. She got me to open the car bonnet, and behold, stowaway kitten. Very dehydrated and scared stowaways. Kitten tax, I guess. Story 2. I once refused to get into an elevator with a guy who looked normal, but made my skin crawl for no reason. I felt like an idiot and walked up the stairs instead. Found out the next morning he'd been arrested for assaulting someone in that same building an hour later. Story 3. Once upon a time, I got this overwhelming urge to text a friend of mine, just to ask how he was doing. I was in the middle of folding laundry, and my gut told me this text absolutely cannot wait. Not one moment. Not until I'm done with the laundry, which would have taken just a few minutes. The text had to go right now. Turns out he had been moments away from ending his life. He had everything ready. Important papers laid out. Note on the door instructing anyone who came looking to call the police and not enter the house themselves because his corpse is in there. He changed his mind because I sent him a text, just asking how he was doing. A little ramble how busy I had been lately, and we should go get some coffee and catch up soon. He changed his mind because there was still one person on this earth who cared enough to ask how he was doing. Remember to reach out to your friends. If your gut tells you must reach out, do it. You might end up saving a life with one simple text message. Story 4. We were visiting my wife's college friends a few years ago, and one of her friends' husbands seemed odd to me, but I couldn't put a finger on it. I just got a not good vibe. Later that night at the Airbnb, I told my wife and a couple of her close friends my concerns, and they were actually a little upset with me. They told me he was a great dude, and I had no basis, but I politely stood my ground. About 6 months later, my wife told me I was 100% correct, and the guy had been aggressively hitting on another friend of theirs in an incredibly unwelcome manner that amounted to harassment, including the night we were in town, and that his wife was in the process of leaving him. Story 5. I've witnessed 2 deaths in my life, and I had a gut feeling about both of them before it happened. I worked at a bakery. We had a regular customer who was an elderly lady. One day she came in with a completely different demeanor, like she was a scared little girl. She begged me to take her next door to the grocery store and help her shop. I had a gut feeling she was dying and told my manager I was going to help her. We walked over to the shop together and went through the aisles. She behaved like I was her mother. 10 minutes later, she collapsed in a cardiac arrest and couldn't be revived. I'm glad I could give her peace in her final moments. Perhaps I reminded her of her mother in some way, and she just wanted her comfort while she passed the second time was with my own grandfather. He had been in hospital for some time, in an unresponsive state. It was my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. So many family were there. I could sense that day was going to be his last, but when I brought it up to an auntie, she dismissed it because I couldn't describe what the difference was. His breathing was the same, his color was the same, his hands were warm, etc. Shortly after the young family members left, he passed. I truly believe he didn't want to die in front of the younger ones. Story 6. I was young, put on birth control to help with other symptoms, but I really didn't want to be on it. It was a last resort to stop the pain I was in. A week later, my leg was aching. I was like, I've got blood clots. Family brushes it off, called the pharmacy, and they were like, it's been a week. It's not blood clots. It would need more time to develop. Gut was like, nope. So I walked to the ER, and of course I had blood clots from my ankles up to my thighs, and they were still spreading post-medication. I had 0 swelling, 0 redness, just a sore leg and anxiety. Story 7. Was at a movie with an ex. Buddy called and sounded sick. Told me I'm a good friend and was going on, but was getting difficult to hear. Something didn't feel right. Let my ex know I had to leave to check on my buddy. She got pissed and said she would stay behind to watch the rest of the movie. I said, okay, I'm leaving now. She got more pissed and came with me. Once I got to the apartment, Buddy was laying on the floor, foaming at the mouth, scooped him up and drove him to the hospital. Doc told me he was within minutes of dying. Story 8. I touched my breast during sex and felt a lump there. I was 26 years old. I had a bad feeling about it, but everyone I talked with, including my doctor who examined me, said it was a cyst. You're too young to be sick, so don't worry about it. But I did have a bad feeling about it, went to a second doctor, refused to get off the exam table until he scheduled a biopsy, and yep, it was stage 2 malignant. I'm 67 now, and listening to a gut feeling saved my life. Story 9. My older brother had a friend that gave me the absolute creeps. Anytime he showed up at a get-together, I made myself scarce. About a year goes by, and I realize he hasn't popped up in a while. So I asked my brother where'd he go. My brother told me he hurt his girlfriend, she survived, and was in jail. I will never not trust my instincts, ever. Story 10. I was supposed to get married on October 25th, 2024. I just got a bug up my ass that I didn't want to wait. I was feeling antsy and just restless, and October didn't feel right, so I moved my wedding to February 2024, October 19th, 2024. My dad collapsed and we found out he had a major infection and it paralyzed him from the chest down. Had I not moved my wedding, I would have had to cancel it. And also, I was able to have my dad walk me down the aisle, which he couldn't now, story 11. I had this gut feeling that my dog wasn't going to be with us much longer. He showed no symptoms and wasn't even old at the time. I remember sitting on the floor, petting him, and this feeling came over me. About 2 weeks later, there was an emergency and we had to put him down, story 12. What traveling in Thailand, I'd been traveling together with another backpacker for a couple of weeks, taking buses around. We were going to get the bus from Chiang Mai to Bangkok, and for some reason, I got a very bad feeling about it. I told him I think we should fly, and he insisted he wanted to get the bus. I still decided to fly due to a gut feeling. The bus crashed and flipped over. The person sitting in the seat opposite died, and my friend had to be cut out of the bus with angle grinders whilst he had a broken foot. I know buses in Thailand are dangerous, but I'd taken many in that area without much thought of it. It definitely makes me wonder at times what would have happened. Story 13. My Bill tried to move his girlfriend in after less than a week of dating because she was going to become homeless. We were going to give her a chance, pending a meeting between her, Bill, and my partner and I, even though moving a literal stranger in with us made me nervous. During the meeting, the woman said a few things that sounded like lies to me. Very small lies, but they set off alarm bells for me. My Bill and partner were totally fooled and didn't pick up on any bad vibes, but I couldn't get my apprehension out of my head. So I called my paralegal mother and had her check up on this woman. Turns out, she had multiple convictions for DV against her last partner, had threatened him and his new partner with knives, had her children taken by CPS due to substances use and physical abuse. The list went on and on. She did not move in with us, and from then on, the boys had to take me seriously when I told them something didn't feel right about a situation. Story 14. I worked for a family as a sitter, aid for their elderly mom/meal. It was in their home. A new night person came on, and she made a few pretty disparaging comments about the woman to me upon shift change. I got a really bad feeling from her, like hairs on the back of my neck standing up. First thing in the morning, I called her Dill and told her about the comments. I told her I had a really bad feeling about the woman. She took me seriously and let the lady go immediately. 2 weeks later, I was watching the news, and this same woman was on for brutally pistol whipping an elderly man she was working for. Story 15. My aunt tried to set me up with her best friend's son when we were both in college. Knew he was gay the second I saw him. Normal looking guy into normal activities. He came out a year later. Very sweet person. Turned out well. Story 16. I moved from Pennsylvania to South Carolina. About a year later, I took a trip to see my mom. Ran into 4 friends from Pennsylvania. They offered to take me to the mall to hang out. Something told me to not go. I told them I would go another day because it would be disrespectful to go visit and not hang out with family first. If you knew me then, you'd understand how rare that would be for me. At the time, and didn't enjoy hanging out with my mother. She knew abuse was happening and allowed it to continue. We haven't talked in 20 years now. They clipped a semi while weaving through traffic at 120 miles per hour. All of them died. One passenger was ejected and skidded to a stop on concrete, essentially turning him into a meat crayon. Another occupant, I think the driver, was snapped in half with his lower body in the front seat and the upper body was underneath the car. I found out when the helicopter to transport one of the soon-to-be-dead friends landed almost immediately outside the house. Worst part, I was there for a week and they never cleaned up the blood. Very solemn reminder for that whole trip. Story 17. I was sitting at a play with my wife/some family members. It was incredibly cramped inside, and the way seating was set up, it felt like you were breathing directly into the person's neck in front of you. One of the more uncomfortable experiences. As we're sitting there, waiting for the play to start, my wife was in her seat, eating a soft pretzel. All I could think was, the only thing that will make this worse is if my wife throws up in front of everyone. And I actually envisioned her doing as well. Immediately as I thought that, she puked up a piece of the pretzel into the crappy little paper plate. She was pregnant at the time, but wasn't vomiting regularly or anything. It felt like a glitch in the Matrix, like I seriously saw into the future, even just a few seconds. One of the weirdest things to happen to me. Story 18, 4 a.m. I got one of those Grenada Ring once scam calls in my phone. It woke me up. My then wife got the same call in hers a second later. Our numbers were 1 digit off, so they were obviously calling all numbers in sequence in our area. She didn't wake up. While I was looking up the number and reading about the scam, I suddenly got a gut feeling she wasn't honest with me about a girl's night out she had recently. I looked at her phone and she'd spent the evening with another man and her friend was covering for her. So thanks, scam call. Story 19. I was introduced to a guy many years back, Jay, who was kind of shoehorned into my friend group. At most, he was a drinking buddy who I thought was a decent friend at the time, After I got sober, I couldn't shake the idea he was actually a piece of crap. So I distanced myself from him and tried to get my best friend T to do the same. Lo and behold, after the two of them had an argument over Joe ducking Rogan, of all things, Jay physically assaulted T. So my gut was pretty spot on with that one. Story 20. I put my toddler, Jack Jack, down for a nap and got my older kid on the bus for preek. I had checked on Jack Jack before I went out to the bus stop, and he was out cold. I made myself a coffee and was headed for the garden for a smoke, but I had to pee. For some reason, I decided to use the upstairs bathroom so I could poke my head in and make sure Jack Jack was still asleep. He was not. In the 10 minutes or so between the pre-bus check and my potty break, Jack has woken up, climbed out of his crib, scaled a bookshelf, and reached the cords for the blinds, which were stuffed in the top of the blind well over my head. Jack Jack is fine. He's 18 now, but that day was nearly a tragedy. I don't know why I checked on him. My brain knew he should sleep another hour or so. He made no noise on the monitor, and nothing was disturbed, not even the books on the shelf. Story 21. I was promoted to a newly created position as a liaison between my employer and the main client. I was then given permission to sit in one MTGs between our developers and the client. And what I heard in those meetings convinced me we were in trouble and likely to lose our biggest contract. I had that overwhelming sense after one meeting. I started to hunt for a new job and was also sharing my fears with some coworkers, found a new job, announced my planned departure, and the company's CEO responded with an account-wide email congratulating me for my next move, and also saying it was a wise move because we will lose the X contract at the end of next month. Massive layoff followed, and only 3 or 4 people kept their jobs. Story 22. Woke up one morning in 2006, way earlier than usual, and had a feeling something bad had happened during the night. I didn't understand it at first, but I knew deep down that as soon as I would get up, something bad would happen. And almost down to the minute, the phone rang and it was the nursing home telling my mom that my grandpa had passed. Another time, this one was around 5 years back, we decided to take a family selfie at Christmas. My other grandpa, my grandma, my mom, my dad, and me. A few days later, I looked at it and suddenly had this eerie feeling that my mom was going to pass first, then my grandpa, and then my grandma. I thought it was just nonsense at the time and didn't want to think much of it. Half a year later, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and was the first to pass. My grandpa followed a year after her, and then my grandma another 6 months later. I still get goosebumps thinking about this. Story 23. I was 7 years old or so. I was making a snowman at my parents' friend's house in the front yard. About 100 yards to the rear of the house was a small pond that my twin and brothers were playing on. I was about to put the head on snowman, and as I was lifting it up, I dropped it and ran into the house, screaming, "Go to the pond!" My dad and other father raced out of the house, and I still remember trying to keep up and having the snow from their boots kick off onto my face. I could hear them panting and wheezing. I thought I was going to be in big trouble for causing the commotion. As they got onto the ice, they found my brothers barely able to hold on to him, as he had sunk through a hole that opened up. My dad's friend grabbed him out and smacked his back, causing a bunch of pond water to belch out of mouth, threw him over his shoulder, and ran back to the house to warm him up. Whole thing took like 4 minutes. It was too far to hear anything, and somehow, I just knew story 24. Had a dream my girlfriend was cheating on me. Felt like one of those women, I'm a dude, who were labeled as crazy for having those dreams. Thought it wasn't possible because she's always with me once she's back from work. Next day, I asked my GF if I could have a look at her phone. She went ballistic and refused, then didn't talk to me the entire day the day after. She handed me her phone like no big deal. I knew she had deleted all evidence, especially when the timestamps didn't make sense for various chats with the guy from work. Didn't bother to try to get evidence and just left her. There's something very subconscious in us that tries to warn us about many things. Interesting how our brains work, though. Sometimes to warn us, yet at the same time, tries to logic itself out of it. Story 25, my vision just suddenly feeling off. I didn't have any vision lost, but I remember being at work and I looked up and suddenly something seemed wrong. It felt distorted and wrong, but looked fine. When I would close my left eye, there was a tiny sliver of black on the upper left next to my nose, but I couldn't tell if it was just my nose or not. I went to my normal eye doctor, and I don't think I described my symptoms right, and he said my eyes were just really dry. Like, okay, probably. 3 days later, though, it was still bugging me. And when my dad was 39 to 40, he had a detached retina, so I left work an hour early and found a random eye place close to my work to get a second opinion. I told them I felt insane and couldn't describe it right, but just look at my retina hard. But I still thought, oh way is it happening, just quell your anxiety. Then the eye doctor shows me the retina pictures and says, I'm glad you decided to get a second opinion because you do have a detached retina. The next day, I had a vitrectomy and scleral buckle put in, and the retina specialist said my detachment actually looked like it had been going on for a while, and my retina in my other eye had holes in it. Honestly, though, I don't think I would have went for the second opinion, though, without the specter of a half-blind dad who also had a retina detachment. I kind of already had the answers to the test. He didn't, story 26. I left home to go pick up a pizza, then had to run back home because I forgot my purse. I had a sudden flash of my daughter standing in the kitchen crying and saying, "Mom's hurt." I went in the house, grabbed my purse, went for the pizza. A minute later, I had a car accident and ended up in the hospital. I believe an onlooker took my phone and called my emergency contact, my daughter, story 27, not me. My cousin and I were walking to campus on our usual route. On that day, for whatever reason, he suggested we avoid the shortcut and take the long way. I agreed because why not? Along the longer path were some bushes above a bridge. They started shaking, moving, and between 4 to 6 guys jumped out but rapidly ran past us. After about another 4 or so seconds, one guy comes out, the same bush with blood on his shirt, shouting he'd been robbed. He had taken the shortcut. The guys who robbed and stabbed him were in that passage when we decided to go around. Story 28. I was hanging with my best friend and her cousin. Somehow we ended up talking and laughing with these dudes same age group as us. They invite us to a party they knew about. Not hosting, just knew about it. And instantly everything in my body said, "Duck no." The girls I was with wanted to go, but I somehow convinced them not to. A week later, I saw in the paper 2 of the boys had been arrested for abused a woman and were accused of abused several others. Fast forward several years, I was in the military stationed over in Korea. All my friends were off base at a different friend's house but me. I had to work the weekend, so I was getting off later than then with the promise of meeting them. But as I got off work, it was starting to snow heavily. Something in my gut told me not to get a cab to where everyone was. And thank God, I didn't. There was a pileup of cars on the exact route to where my buddies all were, and several people were killed or severely injured. Story 29. I was driving home with my kids in the car and stopped at a red light. When a light turns green, I usually wait a few seconds before going, but this time, something told me to keep waiting longer. Probably 8 seconds later, a car sped through which I couldn't see because there was a semi in the outer lane. Story 30. About 15 years ago, I was at a high school kickback with my older brother. I suddenly felt weird and said to my brother, "I feel like we should go." And he said, "Yeah, me too." And we did. Turns out everyone got busted for drinking soon after we left. Story 31. When my now husband and I were dating, we went on an international trip with some friends. We met up with a couple living abroad who was best friends with everyone else in the group. My husband had dated the woman in the couple during college, and her husband was who she dated and married after they broke up many years before. Everyone loved this couple, had known them for years and were very close. I had never met either of them. The vibes were so ducking off with the husband, subtle but off. The wife was lovely and fun. I couldn't shake this feeling that the husband did not want us there because of the romantic history of my husband and this guy's wife. I chalked his behavior up to some male insecurity having to be around his wife's ex. His vibes made me so uncomfortable that I left the group to go back to our hotel alone and let them all have the rest of their night. We were supposed to see them again the next night, and I made alternate plans to not have to be with him again. Fast forward a few years later, and the wife is moving back to the States because that husband had been beating her so badly for a long time. They had moved abroad and started a business together, and the abuse got so much worse when they were away from everyone they knew. Story 32. To this day, this still blows my mind. Several years ago, my boyfriend and I go to see a movie. It was an AMC theater. We sit mid-tier right behind the bar/railing. We got there early, eating popcorn and watching people come in and sit. I noticed 2 people, 2 younger men, come in and sit in the very first row. Something in my head, mine said. I wonder how people would react if they just stood up and started addressing the crowd. I visualized it in my mind. About 2 minutes passed and my heart nearly stopped beating as one of them stood up and turned and started talking. I didn't really hear what he said. Maybe something about God. I don't know. I was too busy dragging my boyfriend out of the theater. I was so scared. I actually went and told theater staff. It shook me that bad. They went in. The 2 men were gone, but I refused to go back inside. I will always wonder what that was. Story 33 was at a big dub night in Leeds. It started off with a bloke barging past my mate and then trying to start a fight with him for disrespecting him. It felt off all night until I decided to just drag my mates out. 5 minutes afterwards, someone got shot. Never felt so vindicated, especially since my friend said I was just being stoned and paranoid at the time. Story 34. One night, a few weeks or so into me moving to college, I tried to fall asleep but felt very restless for some reason, so I got up and decided to pace around the apartment. I came into the kitchen and it took me a moment to realize the oven was on and was emitting a red glow. Turns out my roommate had left a frozen hash brown in there and forgot about it, and when I opened it up, it It had burst into flame. Thankfully, we had a fire extinguisher on hand, so I put it out quickly. I remember there was no smell of smoke at all, and I never saw my roommate put the hash brown in beforehand. I didn't notice any immediate sign of a fire. I just had a gut feeling that something was wrong that kept me awake. Story 35. My friends invited me along for a road trip and something told me not to join. Just got this terrible feeling that made me think I shouldn't. Their car rolled off the road and, while they all survived, the part of the roof over the empty seat caved in completely. So whether it would have been me or someone else, if someone had been sat there, they would have died or at least been horribly injured. Story 36. I was waiting for my cab once and had this anxiety in the pit of my stomach that I could not let go of. Something kept telling me to cross the street. I tried ignoring it, but I felt like someone shouted in my ear to move now. I crossed the street and a huge ass branch of a tree crashed, and a supremely venomous snake with it. This is in Australia, so you know you're damn if bitten by the snake. I would have been badly hurt by the tree and would have had the snake bite me had I not moved. Canceled the cab and went home to my husband's story. 37. My ex and I had started talking again for a week when one night he tells me, "Just got home. Let me call you back." As soon as he hung up, I said he's living with someone. When I called right back, he didn't answer, and when he finally picked up, he admitted it. Story 38. I was texted by my boss's boss to see if I could hop on a quick 10-minute call with about 10 minutes notice, which was not abnormal. It was my son's birthday, and I'd taken the day off. I was out walking the dog about a mile from my house, so I texted her back. It was like, yeah, and started to run home so I can get there in time. About halfway home, I realized I was about to get laid off, slowed down, and started to walk. Got home, called her, and sure enough, her and a woman with the last name of Payne was on the phone. They told me it was an exciting time for the company, and they were pivoting direction, but unfortunately, I no longer have a position. I loved my job. There were no layoffs before, but this was the first round. My dad and I worked at the same company, and they let us both go at the same time. It was a gut punch, and I'll never forgive the line of 3 or 4 people who made that decision. I work for the competitor now. Story 39. I was in Cairo and got myself a train ticket to Alexandria. I did not feel like getting on the train. I walked back to my hotel and bought a bus ticket online. When I was in the bus, news came that at the time of my arrival, there was a massive explosion and a lot of fatalities in that same train station. It was a real disaster and many people burnt. Story 40. This has happened multiple times in my life. I'm going about my day, everything is normal, and then I'm hit with a weird sense that something's wrong. I don't know what or anything else, just something is off. Examples. Told a friend of mine to take a detour when he got back to his place. Don't drive the same route. Bus crashed into 2 cars when he would have been in that area and most likely a victim. Told some people I was hanging with that wanted to go get weed not to. I was adamant. They went anyway. They hit a deer on the way home. One was put in the hospital with a spinal fracture. Another broke his arm, and then other ended up face planting the windshield. Told my ex-husband not to take the same route to work like he did. Didn't know why. Car went through a red light. Semi-truck swerved to avoid car. Crashed into another car, right where he would have been sitting. Told a trucker buddy I didn't know what was wrong with him stopping at a certain truck stop we had both been at before, but I didn't want him to stop there. He did. All the trailer tires were slashed and half the load he was carrying ended up on the ground and down into a ditch behind the truck stop. Recently, at work, doing my job, and it hit me. Something was really wrong. Called my boyfriend to see if he was all right and found out his mother died for 6 minutes after having a heart attack. I don't know why I get these feelings. I don't really know what they are. But I know when something's wrong, I start sending texts or calling people because, well, something's wrong. His mother's doing fine resting at home. She survived, gave everyone a scare. Story 41. Okay, I was measuring a massive old historic hotel in order to draw up the floor plan. Other than the 4 rooms occupied by owner/staff, there was only one guest at the time, so I knew to avoid a specific room. I had a set of master keys and was working my way room by room through all the floors. I left for about an hour for lunch and resumed my work when I returned. I had been freely unlocking and entering rooms all day. For some reason, at room 214, I hesitated and knocked. Someone answered from within, letting me know the room was occupied. Later, the front desk clerk told me someone had checked in while I was out for lunch. I don't know what made me hesitate, but I am sure glad I did. Story 42. My daughter's Sunday school teacher was a PDF every 2 years. The church we attended rotated Sunday school teachers. On that morning, the superintendent told me how lucky we were that our oldest was going to be taught by Bill, one of the best teachers they had, and how his family was a pillar of the church. After the service, Bill caught up with me as I was buckling my kids in the car, introducing himself and complimenting me on how well-behaved my daughter was and how we were obviously great parents. He then shared how his classes go beyond the classroom and do community service and would even do movie nights with his family occasionally. I got the extreme heebie-jeebies talking to this guy. I felt like he was buttering me up. I said my goodbyes to him and called my wife from the road to tell her we were never returning to that church. We did not. 5 years later, he was arrested and convicted of abusing. Story 43. Now, I had a family trip planned to Dubai. We've been planning to go there since last year and we would stay 1 month. 1 week before the trip, I fell down and broke my elbow. 5 days before the trip, the airline canceled one of our connections, forcing us to travel a much longer route and do a layover of 14 plus hours. 4 days before the trip, my main credit card was stolen, the one I would use during the trip. 1 day before the trip, the dog sitter that would take care of my dog called saying that she would have to cancel our booking. So I had to spend the day looking a replacement that could stay with my dog for 1 month. It was when I told my wife, "Duck, this trip is cursed." So many things happened in the last few days. I just want to arrive in Dubai now and relax. Then, on the next morning, when we were all in the car, driving to the airport, I got an SMS saying that my entire trip got canceled due to conflict in the Middle East. Story 44. I met my best friend's new friend. Immediately got the heebie-jeebies, and it always felt awkward. My friend was literally the nicest person on the planet. So I really checked in with myself and wrote it off as me being jealous or awkward myself. The new friend, over a few months, dropped gloating, subtle comments that my best friend had told this person personal things about me in a derogatory way. They even tried to get me drunk and forced me to do karaoke to humiliate me. When I refused and went to the bathroom, I heard my best friend saying, "She thinks she's a singer," and laughing at me. I told her a few days prior I'd taken a singing lesson. Complete shock. Zero indication she was like that in 10 years of friendship. Or she just became a bully, I don't know. I've experienced some awful crap, but for some reason finding out the person I grew up with, considered family and trusted the most, was not the person I knew still disturbs me to this day. It did get much worse, and I wish I'd listened when that gut feeling kicked in. Story 45. When I was 12, my mom was driving me to my second day of high school. My grandparents lived at the bottom of my street. I saw my grand's car coming up the hill towards us and said to my mom, "Uncle E is dead." She said, "No, she's just coming to see you off to school." My uncle was 31. Turned out he had a congenital heart condition and had died unexpectedly. Story 46. You know how some people have a gaydar? They just see that someone is gay, even without overtly gestures, etc. I have a pedodar. I can somehow tell. No idea how, other than it's the eyes. Something terribly disturbed and broken in their eyes, and the overall vibe, but at a first glance, their eyes. My recent correct guess was some bloke that was hailed as an excellent professor and genius trainer. He has been caught abusing and will be sentenced. Story 47. Had a gut feeling that something was wrong with my husband's heart. I wasn't taken seriously by husband, family, doctors. A year later, he had a cardiac emergency and our neighborhood doctor saved his life. Story 48. In high school during break, I got this sudden sense that something was falling towards me, almost like an out-of-body experience of something falling through the sky, and I remember thinking to myself that I should move. I didn't, and it was bird crap right on my head. Story 49. Was leaving town for a holiday. Had a feeling we needed to check the house. Turned out the front window was unlocked. Then had an unshakable feeling of dread the entire weekend and kept seeing a blood-soaked scarf in my mind's eye. Turned out a dear staff member ended his life that weekend. Story 50. When I was a teenager, I was taking a nap after school and sat straight up and asked my mom why the sirens were so loud. She didn't hear anything. A couple hours later, a friend called me to inform me that one of our best friends passed in a car accident. Story 51. When my friend and I were budding writers, she wrote to a local author of novels, and we ended up meeting him for coffee to talk about the industry. Afterwards, she asked if I wanted to see him again, but I didn't get much out of it and thought he was weird, so I said no. I think she saw him a couple more times. He's now being investigated for having and distributing CP. Story 52. Had a friend get me to join the company she'd moved to. Been around for ages, but just had a shakeup on the exec team. Went through the motions, interviewed with the CEO, etc. Got the offer in hand, then I got cold feet. Something didn't feel right. I still used the offer to get current company to give me my desired raise, but told the new company I'd have to pass. Not even a month later, massive fraud was uncovered and the company ceased to exist. Dodged a bullet there. The spidey senses worked for once. I should also add that the CEO I engaged with and my friend were both completely uninvolved with the fraud, but it still have massive impacts on careers when the news came out. Story 53. It was not so much a gut feeling, but I had a dream that felt extremely real. In it, my ex-friend, we had fallen out a couple of years prior, had been hit by some psycho, and I went to her funeral. It just felt so real. and I was crying in my sleep and woke up crying. About a year later, I found out that she passed away from cancer, and that prior to that, she'd been in numerous physically abusive relationships. I regret so much that I didn't get back in touch with her. I was always thinking I would eventually, but was scared that if I did, she'd reject me. Story 54. Was super reluctant to go to a friend's house for his birthday dinner. He was really guilting me, but I felt deeply uncomfortable about it. He was a close friend, and I couldn't put my finger on why. I decided to go, but to have an early night and not drink much. I drank very little, blacked out, and woke up with him next to me in bed. He'd assaulted me. I wish I'd listened to my gut. Story 55. I felt a little uncomfortable planning the itinerary for my birthday trip, so I canceled it a month in advance. Good thing we hadn't booked anything besides the plane tickets because the area we were supposed to visit was hit by a massive storm. We would have been stranded if we had gone. Story 56. I used to be decently cute in college, got asked out a lot. Most of the time it wasn't a big deal. A lot of guys were chill and would accept I was already with someone, or if the dude was creepy, it was typically super obvious as they'd be way older or immediately pushy, etc. But this one time was different. I was in the parking lot and a guy approached, clearly trying to flirt. He didn't have any of the obvious red flags. He seemed polite, was actually around my age, looked put together, wasn't all that physically intimidating, generally okay on the surface, but something about him that was making every nerve in my body scream, "You need to run now." If you asked me what I was picking up on, I honestly couldn't tell you. I just felt deeply and powerfully. This guy was really bad news. I found an excuse to run over to a few girls an aisle over, and I think I lied and told them he was an ex, so they'd let me just follow them for a bit until I felt safe going back for my car. A month later, I saw the guy on social media. He'd assaulted. Story 57. I was about 9 when my grandparents came to live with us. At one point, my grandpa was put in a nursing home as he was 93, and with my parents owning and working long hours at their own business. Even having nurses come daily to do brief visits, he needed more care than they could provide. I was 11 and at school one day, and we were sent outside to walk the track, which we did on occasion. I started feeling off, like I was getting really upset and nervous and couldn't understand what was happening. I kept trying to calm myself down and take deep breaths, but eventually I broke down and told the teacher I didn't feel good and needed to go call my dad. My stomach was in knots and I was a mess when I called him, and when he asked me what was wrong without having even thought about my grandparents, I blurted out, "I think Grandpa is going to die." He came and got me, and the rest of the day I was just waiting in the office for them to close so we could go home. My mom stepped away for a phone call, and a few minutes later, they both came back and told me not to panic, but that Grandpa was in the hospital and it didn't look good. We went home, and around 7 p.m., they got news that he passed. As soon as they told me that they were also asking me how I knew and what made me start worrying about it that day, I had no answers. But a few minutes later, I went to the bathroom and had gotten my very first period. It was a really strange day. Story 58. I was dating a very close friend I had for the past 8 years. In college, we'd drive 4 hours each way just to hang out a few times a semester. He knew my family really well. When we were both living near each other after college, we started hanging out every day. Finally addressed that we've developed feelings for each other and started dating. We dated for months. It was great, always having a blast. One day we went on a wonderful date and he stayed the night. I had a stressful doctor's appointment the day after he stayed the night, and he needed to start packing to move to a different apartment. We made plans for him to pick me up, us go to the doctor, and then we'd start packing his apartment. The afternoon as he was leaving my place and we were kissing goodbye, I had an overwhelming gut feeling I'd never see him again. It's been 14 years. I still haven't heard from him. He's fine, by the way. Story 59. Many years ago, my cousin was living with me. My then boyfriend was over that night, and we decided we wanted some fast food. It's probably close to 11:30 p.m., so pretty late, but we were watching movies and had no plans to stop, so duck it. Late night munchie run. Cousin was staying home, and I was going to go for the drive. I was getting my shoes on and then just felt like I should stay home and couldn't shake the fluttering in my guts about it. BF was a little miffed, but went anyway. He was on the highway going to the 24-hour BK when a new-to-driving in the winter driver clipped a snowbank in the right lane, and their car was basically slingshotted over into our car. It took out the entire front passenger side of the car, including the seat. My boyfriend had a cop drive him back to my place, and he was white as a ghost, sobbing because I should have been dead. Story 60, 98.5 over 100 times. If I don't like someone when I first meet them, I'm never going to like them. I've been wrong only 1.5 times thus far. 0.5 in the sense that I initially disliked him, started liking him, and then he changed into someone less likable, thus meaning I was technically eventually correct. Story 61. My girlfriend at the time and I were out, and we ran into a guy she went to college with and talked for a minute, and he suggested getting coffee and catching up. I interrupted and made an excuse for us to leave. She trusted me because I've never been controlling or jealous, but asked me what was up. I told her he gave me the feeling of a snake person, what I call people with the ideology that if I hurt you, it's your fault for letting me. She thought I was wrong, but we went about our lives and forgot about it. It was about 3 months later that she got a message from her best friend, who went to college with her, about him being arrested on multiple abuse charges. Story 62. My entire life, my grandmother told me about how every year on what would one day be my birthday, she would get extra ready because she knew it was going to be an important date to her one day. She showed me diary entries from a young age dated on my birthdays saying she was excited. Anyways, guess what? Turned out to be her death date. Story 63. Babysitting at an equestrian competition. Escorting the 8-year-old into the woods to go piss when I just had a feeling something was horribly wrong at their trailer. Friend of my dad's was pissing behind a tree and told him to take the boy back because something was wrong. Sprinted back and some random old guy was trying to sweet talk his way into the trailer. I give zero ducks about shame, started yelling, asking who the hell he was and what he was doing. He left. Turns out he was a local convicted. Story 64. I randomly woke up at 2 a.m. just to see my father drop to the ground after asthma attack. Few minutes later, started to CPR without really know how to do it properly, but turns out it saved his life. Story 65. I've overslept and am about to be late for work. The thought I had the instant before jumping out of bed and scrambling to get ready catch the bus. Story 66. This happened over a slightly longer period of time, but I do believe it was connected. I became absolutely convinced something terrible was going to happen to my mom. I couldn't identify why I felt this way, but I just had severe anxiety about her getting hurt or sick, and the feeling that I was running out of time with her. The anxiety stayed with me constantly and did not stop. I learned to live with it. 2 years later, she came to visit me as a surprise for my birthday, my freshman year of college. We had a great 2 days, and then she left to fly home at lunchtime just before I performed in a recital. When it was my turn to sing, I couldn't get through the song because I started crying. At the time, I didn't even know why I was crying. The end of the next semester, my mom went to the hospital with a glioblastoma. She was gone within a month of that, and visiting me for my birthday was the last time I saw her acting normal, as by the time I went home for Christmas, it had started developing and she was acting slightly off, though obviously I didn't know why. Story 67. Petting my sweet kitty, and I suddenly knew she was going to pass while we were sleeping. She was old, her kidneys were failing, but she was trying so hard to hang on. I told her that I loved her, that I was so happy we had so many years together, and that I knew she was suffering and it was okay for her to go. Next morning, my husband shakes me awake and I say, "She's gone, isn't she?" She was. Rip Cleo, you were such a sweet old lady. Story 68. I had a feeling someone was trying to get into my apartment. We lived on the top floor, and right next to our front door was another door that led to the building's loft, which was empty. Our front door had glass panes, and I could see the figure of someone standing outside but facing the loft door. They would stand there for several minutes, completely still, then either go downstairs or go into the loft. If they went into the loft, I never saw them come out. I'm not a girl in a horror movie, so I never opened the door or tried in any way to interact with them. I asked my mom if we could call the police, but she said no, and that I was either imagining things or it was the building's superintendent. I then thought I could smell cigarette smoke coming through my bedroom window during the night. I told my mom, and she said it was probably her cigarette smoke wafting from her room. Long story short, a total stranger had been stalking me for a few weeks and was trying to break into my apartment to abuse me. I only found out at the police station after he tried to beat and abuse me while I was out walking my dog. He confessed to it all and said he had been going into the loft, going through the skylight onto the roof, then would sit outside my window for hours and try to pump himself up. He allegedly felt very bad about it. Story 69. Used to fly internationally a lot back in the day. I had an overwhelming instinct not to get on a particular flight to London. I'd never felt this way before. Turns out, volcanoes in Iceland had started erupting, spewing mad amounts of volcanic dust. Flights were universally canceled or turned around. Ours was canceled just before boarding. I never got to find out if I would have heeded that gut instinct. Story 70. I was on an old public bus sitting on the right side of the seat behind the driver. He had his window open, so from my seat I could see the rear view mirror. Out of the blue, I had this urge to move to the left of the seat. It was like an unconscious force moving my body. The moment I moved, another bus coming in the opposite direction got so close that it hit and broke the rear view mirror, and a large piece of broken glass flew right at where my head would have been if I hadn't moved. Story 71. One day I had this incredible urge to go back to the little town I grew up in. I wanted to see my best friend. Such a strong urge that I asked my husband at the time if we could take a trip. He said sure, but on the weekend since he had classes, and it was a long way, so we'd be overnighting at least a day or two. I felt anxious about waiting. I really wanted to go right then, but obviously dropping everything to go wasn't realistic. We left early on the weekend, and when we got there, I found a payphone and used the phone book to see if my old neighbors were still there. It had been over a decade, but I found the parents of my best friend that I grew up with and called immediately. The person answered with, "Hello, this is S." And I got that feeling of anxiety all over again and just blurted out, "S, this is L. I don't know if you remember me, but But I grew up across the street from you when you were little. Is your brother home? I'd love to talk to him. The silence was long and painful, and before he finally managed to answer, I was already crying. He told me that on the Wednesday, his brother had ended his life. Wednesday was the same day I had suddenly gotten the impulse to go back home. I did visit with them and actually stayed for a month, doing a few little jobs. But it wasn't home without my best friend, even though we hadn't seen or spoken to each other in years. It's been nearly a decade, and I still cry sometimes wondering if I had looked him up and called and said I was coming, if it would have made a difference or not. Story 72. Got a job offer for a great job, closer to home, better office, exactly the same work as I was doing before, much better pay, better benefits. The interview had gone great and I knew a lot of former colleagues who worked there. And yet I cannot explain it, but I felt compelled not to accept the job. I cannot explain it at all. This was November 2019. If I had accepted, I would have started in February 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. The company I got the job offer from closed all their business in the UK a few months later. If I had taken the new job, I would have been working there for a few months before being made redundant. I wouldn't have even got redundancy pay. It would have been impossible to get another job in the middle of COVID. I cannot imagine the debt I would have been in. The company I did work for furloughed me. I struggled to make ends meet then, and I still had some salary coming in. I dread to think how I would have coped without any income. Story 73. We lived in the doctor's residence in a hospital, separate rooms across the hall from each other. She had been out the night before. I went on shift and had this nagging feeling. So I called her room a couple of times during the morning, but there was no answer. Took an early lunch break and went back to resident. Her door was open, so I knocked and went in. And as luck would have it, she had hid under covers, but the bloke she was with was in bed. Needless to say, the relationship was over. I moved out a couple of days later. I got the normal, please, it was a mistake, crap from her, etc. But thank God I got away from that one. Story 74. Late summer of 2001, probably August, maybe early July. I was freaked out about planes flying into buildings. I was sure that it could happen either accidentally or on purpose, and sure that other people weren't worried enough about it. Story 75. I woke up at 7:17 a.m. on the morning of September 11th and vividly remember thinking to myself, today's date is 911, like the number you call in an emergency. I have never once thought about the date before or since then when waking up. Story 76. I was grocery shopping around 8 p.m. at night by myself in college. I went through self-checkout and started heading out of the store. On my way out, there was a man standing in front of the Redbox machine near the exit that gave me a weird feeling, but I kept walking. As I was about to exit the store, I just couldn't shake the feeling. I stopped very abruptly and turned around. He was gone. Walked back in and asked an employee to walk me to my car. As I was doing this, I saw the man appear from behind a wall of soda near the exit and leave quickly. It was as if he had been following me and slid behind the wall when I turned around. Found out that his car was parked right next to mine. No way to know for sure, but pretty sure he meant harm, and that night may have ended differently for me without that gut feeling. Story 77. Driving home with my teen daughter one night, and I suddenly said to her, "Lock your door." Older car with manual door locks. About a block and a half later, at a stop sign, some creepy rando came up, grabbed the door handle and tried to open her door. I had not seen anyone because it was dark, and he came out of nowhere. I credit my guardian angel. Story 78. I get that too often. Two of the biggest. I had this horrible feeling one of my friends wasn't okay. I spent the evening calling everyone. When it got late after checking on a bunch of friends and them all being fine, I thought, it must just be in my head. The next morning, I woke to news that a friend had a fatal OD sometime after midnight. I was devastated and couldn't stop crying for 6 months. That broke me. I had a sudden horrible feeling that my daughter was in danger. I scooped up my toddler, leashed the dog, and literally ran to where she was just down the street scootering with a neighbor. They were both perfectly okay. They immediately get in a tiff and my daughter takes her helmet off, throws it, and goes down the hill before I could tell her to stop. Concussion. I'm at least glad I witnessed it, or we would have had no idea what was wrong when the symptoms showed up a few days later. Story 79. Close to midnight on a random Sunday night, super tired and about to crawl into bed, I got the nagging feeling I need to go downstairs and check the sump pump. Something told me I couldn't wait until morning and needed to check. Sure enough, went to look and the sump pit was full right to the top and sump pump wasn't working. Listening to my gut saved my basement from flooding. Story 80. I thought my Phil's new financial advisor was a slime ball, and I refused to switch over to his firm. Then he stole my Phil's life savings, along with those of more than 24 other people, and now he's in jail. Sadly, another instance with my Phil handing over money to a fraudster. Not as much, but a significant amount. I lose sleep over the fact this person co-owns a business with my husband, and he is probably hiding more problems that we don't know about. Story 81. I once got stuck behind a motorbike that stalled going up some famous twisty turns in Scotland, the Berrydale Breast. She seemed quite a novice driver and not particularly skilled, so I kept my distance well back from her as she crawled up the A9 for another 20 miles. She drove at 40 miles per hour, well under the limit, and kept back, and a queue of traffic formed. It was late at night, about 8 p.m. The sun was still high, a beautiful evening, and we reach a corner and the woman doesn't take it and hits a bridge, flying off her bike and dying instantly. Story 82. My ex and friends secretly hating me. I don't know how I can not be paranoid when I was right every time. And it's not like I believed it so much that it started hurting them. I never said or did anything because I suspected I was just paranoid and knew they'd pretend better if I said anything. My partner's story, but it doesn't end well either. He had an extremely strong gut feeling that something bad was about to happen. We couldn't brush it off, but we also had no idea what it was and how to avoid it. The next morning, my uncle ended his life, a wonderful guy that my partner never had the chance to meet. A week earlier, I decided we would visit him next time, and I knew they would get along. He met him at the funeral. Story 83. COVID-19. It is so weird, but when I heard about the first cases in December 2019, I just got a terrible feeling that something very intense was about to happen. Story 84. I had an ex with a male friend that I just couldn't shake a really bad gut feeling about. Normally, I'm never bothered by male friends, but this one I couldn't let go. Our relationship began to shift from consistent laughing and smiling to her getting more and more distant. About a month later, she left me and told me it was about her and not me. She just wasn't ready for things to get as serious as they were. 2 weeks later, it was all over her Facebook that she was with him. To this day, it's one of the biggest punches to the gut I've ever felt about anything in a relationship. Story 85. A friend and me went to a youth science club gathering nearby. It was the chapter of a different city, but they, a group of some 30 teenagers and young adults, were doing a sleepover on the family property of one of their members close by. So we were invited as well. My friend was going to stay there overnight, but I decided I'd rather sleep home. I stood there in the barn, which was to be used as the sleeping room, as he was rolling out his sleeping bag. There was this girl in my frame of view doing the same, and it was like I got an electric shock or something like that. Right there and then, I knew they were going to get involved that night. The next day, I meet my friend in the evening, and he says smilingly, "You know, I have to tell you something." And I said, "You and that blonde girl hooked up, right?" He looked at me and said, "How do you know?" It wasn't like he was a player. He had never been with a girl before. When I was younger, I had a higher sensitivity to people and events, I think. When I was 15 or so, I once saw a family member enter my grandparents' house, and immediately I knew she was pregnant. And she was. There were other similar things. I seem to have lost that sensitivity in adulthood, though. Story 86. When I first met the CEO of the last company I worked for during the recruiting process, I was being poached from another company, I immediately got a terrible gut feeling about him. Like a very fake, narcissist, slimy liar sense. But I went to work for the company anyway, because everyone else seemed to love him. And for 8 years, I thought he was great and that he and I had a very close, trusting, in many ways personal working relationship. Then, within one terrible week, I found out that he had been completely lying about the company's finances, stealing investor and client money, and lying directly to my face about so much about his life, the company, his background, etc. He disappeared, and the company imploded and got sold off for parts. In the aftermath, he randomly started texting me, saying he wanted to meet me somewhere private and explain. I had never seen this man be violent, but I knew he'd had a violent past, having been in juvie and on the streets as a young man, and my gut was screaming that I might get murdered if I went anywhere with him. I blocked him. I haven't looked into what he's been up to in the ensuing 3 years, and I don't really ever want to hear about him ever again. I consider it the biggest bullet I've ever dodged. Although the company implosion itself was highly traumatic, and as an executive who worked closely with the CEO, I was publicly dragged through the mud hard. Honestly, not surprising, and I don't really blame anyone. But it's proof that the common assumption of there's no way person close to bad guy didn't know is often totally false. People like him are very good at hiding their misdeeds from their biggest supporters. Story 87. This will probably get buried, but here goes. When I was 9, my school had an old man named Mr. Bob working as the school administrator. My bio mom thought he was adorable. She's always had this weird thing for doting on the elderly and used to bring cookies and stuff to him. When she found out he gave piano lessons, she hired him to start teaching my sister and me. I hated Mr. Bob. She always wrote it off that I was just being difficult, but I hated him so much. One day, he showed up for our lesson, but she was at work still. He asked to come in and wait, and I left the security chain locked and told him no, he'd have to wait until she got home. He got a little cranky about it, left, and the lesson was canceled for the day. I got my ass chewed out for it because he wasn't a stranger. It would have been fine. A couple months later, Mr. Bob went to prison for abuse. Biomom never apologized to me and just felt sorry for him. Story 88. My ex and I were long distance at the time and had a tricky time window to talk. He was at AIT And one day, I literally woke up feeling like he cheated on me. Fast forward approximately 6 months later, I flew in so we could move into base housing and looked through his phone and found messages from when I first got the feeling to a few days before I flew in. I also had a dream to check his blocked users on Discord, and boy was I sobbing. Story 89. Had a weird stomach ache that just felt different from any ache I'd had before. It was day 3 of faint, dull stomach pain, packing for a multi-day camping trip, several hours from society. I decided to stay home as my stomach hadn't gotten any better. Turns out, my appendix was trying to burst. I likely would have died if I went camping, not knowing what was happening and also being so far from a hospital. Story 90. I originally planned to have a very relaxed, calm water birth with my baby. Looked into hypnobirthing, practiced meditations, my husband was practicing with me. Decided I wanted an elective section instead. My mom and sister tried to talk me out of it, kept humming and hawing, and it was just in me that it had to be a section. Booked it, turned up, had a baby. It was wonderful, but the surgeon held up part of my son's umbilical cord before she started stitching me back up and said, "Wow, there's a true knot in this. That's rare. If I'd delivered him, possibly. There's a chance the knot would have tightened and deprived him of oxygen. Plus, he had quite a big head, so he would have gotten stuck, and things would have taken longer, meaning more time to be deprived of what he needed. Tuck is really rare, 0.3 to 1.2% of pregnancies, and I'm so glad I had no idea about it. It's tricky to see on an ultrasound. I'm glad I listened to my instincts and went for the C-section birth. The thought of the alternative still haunts me, and he's just turned 1. Story 91. I've only ever told one person. My best friend from high school and I, over the course of our 20s, became more of social media friends than real-life friends for a lot of reasons. Basically, we weren't hanging out anymore, but I still wished her the absolute best and was happy to support from afar. She got pregnant probably a year after I had my first child, and I was over the moon happy for her when I saw her announcement. Then, as it happens, time went by and I didn't really think much of it unless I saw her post something about it. Then randomly one day, as I was sitting at work, she just popped into my mind, and I had this weird gut feeling and thought, I wonder how and her baby are doing. I hope everything is okay. I just felt odd about it, and I couldn't put my finger on it. A week later, I opened Facebook to find out she had a 1 in a million complication and lost her baby at almost full term. To say I was shocked was an understatement. I've always wondered what it was that popped that thought into my head around the same time she was going through the horror of losing her first child. It could have been coincidence, but I never felt it was. Story 92. This is much more benign than a lot of examples here. But here we go. I am a gymnastics coach. At a recent meet, one of my kids was warming up her vault, level 6 Yurchenko, to the mat stack. This meet was taking place in a basketball gym, so beyond the standard regulation mat setup, there was a lot of exposed hardwood floor. Very standard for a gymnastics meet. Anyways, she is a super consistent vaulter and never does anything crazy in the air. But right before she went to compete, I had a sudden overwhelming feeling in my gut to push in the mat on the floor in front of me in so that it was touching the podium mat where the vault is located. Not something we usually do unless we know the kid usually goes to one side of another, but the feeling was so strong I did it anyway. That said, lo and behold, on her first vault, she hit the springboard funky and ricocheted off the table and flopped onto the floor where I'd just put the mat down. If it hadn't been there, she definitely would have gotten hurt. It was a little thing, but I was really thankful I trusted my instincts, as was she. Story 93. I felt like I was gonna die for like a week straight. It felt like an ongoing panic attack. I got meds from my psychiatrist because I thought it was my anxiety. Turns out it was a pulmonary embolism in both lungs. Story 94. I live in a place that gets 1 or 2 snow events per year, with usually just enough to disrupt life for a day or two at most. A few years ago, we had a snow event in the forecast, but it was supposed to be little more than a dusting. My boss didn't even think we'd need to shut down the office. TV guys weren't worried, storm chasers weren't talking about it, nobody cared. I have no idea why, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was going to be something serious. I stocked up on non-perishables and water, filled the propane on my grill, cleaned out the gas logs, insulated my spigots, basically all the things I could think of before a big storm. When it hit, we got several hours of straight-up ice before 10 inches of snow. It shut down my town and surrounding areas for nearly 10 days. People with 4-wheel drive vehicles were posting on Facebook offering to take people to grocery stores, which were wiped out because no trucks could get in for restock. M spent all day every day dragging cars out of ditches. I spent 10 days relaxing at home with my dogs, nice and cozy with a comfortably stocked pantry. Story 95. I get gut feelings a lot, and they're never wrong. Most notably, I was in a really huge fight with my stepmom. Before I went to bed one night, I had this gut feeling I needed to resolve it with her. I couldn't wait. We talked and hugged it out, promised to work on our relationship going forward, and said I love you. Felt better until the next morning while I was at school. Had a pit in my stomach and knew something was wrong before my dad called and left a message to come right home after school. She died that morning. I was always thankful we resolved our fight before she died. More recently, I was working from home and I usually have headphones on listening to music or a Twitch stream or something, but something told me to keep them off for a while. In that window, I happened to hear the unmistakable sound of someone messing with the gate by our front door and a banging sound. Checked the cameras and caught some guys trying and admitting out loud on camera, trying to bust my door open and break in. If I wasn't paying attention, they might have broken in, and who knows what would have happened. Story 96. I was in the shower when all of a sudden I felt weak in the knees. My stomach started turning and I had a feeling of impending doom. It overwhelmed me to the point that I sat down in the tub and called for my younger sister, asked her to bring my phone. I felt an urgent need to contact my partner, who I had been dating for a little over a year at that point. I just knew something was wrong, specifically involving him. I left him some panicked text messages, to which he responded in shock at my knowing, and told me he had just gotten into a car accident. Thankfully, he was okay, but that experience solidified in my mind that the physical isn't all there is to this world. I wholeheartedly believe that was some sort of spiritual link. Story 97. Summer 2024. I felt this strong urge to spend more time at my parents' house. I had a remote internship and could work wherever. Our invincible lab, who had somehow made it to 14, passed away in August. My dad was away the day it happened, and thank God I was there to help my mom take her to the vet, listen to what the vet said, and ultimately decide to put her down. She was going to pass in the next few hours, but we didn't want her to suffer longer, obviously. I'm so thankful that I spent a lot of time with her that summer, as I had been away at college, and it wasn't often that I got to see her at that point. Story 98. I had such an overwhelmingly awful feeling and just knew my pregnancy was over. I called my mom and partner in floods of tears, and they asked the same things. Have you had any bleeding, pain? Have your symptoms changed? I had no objective evidence that anything was wrong. No pain, no bleeding, no change in pregnancy symptoms. They told me I was being overly anxious, that everything was fine. But I just knew. I lost my baby 24 hours later. Story 99. I was going to drive to another city about 45 minutes away with my kids, who were 3 and 1 at the time, and I knew I would get a flat tire. It was weird because I'd had my car in to be serviced the week before, and my tires were checked and fine. I put my kids in the car and walked around it looking at my tires. I kept telling myself this was ridiculous. I drove to the city, and when I was almost home, hit a gargantuan pothole, and bam, flat tire. I couldn't believe it. The roadside assistance guy who came to help me told me he hit it too and thought he would have a flat. And there was another guy pulled over, changing his tire. Who did he hit it? It was obviously a problem, but I didn't know it was there until I hit it. And I don't know why I was so sure I'd get a flat. It was really strange. Never really had anything like that happen again. When did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? Story 1. My mom dropped my brother off at daycare before she had to work in the morning. When she got to work, she had this terrible feeling something was wrong with him. She ended up leaving work and drove to the daycare. She found the daycare lady inside sleeping while the daycare kids, including my brother, were running around the pool. My brother never went back to that daycare again. Story 2. I had a gut feeling I should pull my wallet and phone out of my purse. Not even 20 seconds later, I get mugged. The man dragged me across the sidewalk and stole my purse, but all he ended up getting was a juice box and my birth control. Story 3. Forgot one. About 10 years ago, working security at a site about 50 miles from home, got off shift at midnight and didn't bother to change out of uniform because I was only going to stop for gas. 2 stations in the town I was working in were open after midnight, but it slipped my mind as I drove past the first one, pulled into the other. Same brand, same gas price, same sort of dump entirely, and just didn't like something about it. Nobody else around but he clerk that I could see. But I decided to go back to the other one. Topped off and headed back out of town. I get close to that station again. 3 city cop cars, 2 deputies, and a state trooper are outside blocking the road with guns drawn. Turns out a city cop walked in on a robbery. Dude put a bullet in his vest, and the store owner knocked the robber out cold with a bat before the cop could recover enough to get his gun out. That would have been me, in a uniform with a nice shiny badge, but no body armor. Story 4. I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, ECG, and a few other tests, but all came back normal. After observing me overnight, everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect. My heart rate was still a bit elevated, but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ER doctor asked me how I would feel if they sent me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such and that I had no real basis for it, except that I just felt off about it. He said, fair enough, let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative, then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down. That test was a VQ scan that found, despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms, and I'm on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the ER doctor who was willing to listen to it. Story 5. I smelled burning plastic early in the morning at my family cottage and almost went back to sleep. I was around 15, but got up to investigate. A socket on the outside of the building had caught fire and flames were shooting up the wall. The rest of my family was still sleeping and there wasn't enough smoke for the alarms to go off. I ran and got the fire extinguisher, got my dad up and put it in his hands and pointed him towards the fire, stopped it and called the fire department. Story 6. My aunt told me a story about my dad who greatly dislikes his sister and is an all-around asshole 98% of the time, calling her out of the blue one night while she was in college. She answered, he said he didn't know why, but he had this urge to call her, to make sure she was okay. She told him she was fine and thanked him for calling to check on her. She never told anyone else except me, and hopefully a therapist or two. But she was holding the bottle of pills she was planning to end her life with right when he called her, 20-some years later, and she's very happy with her decision to live. Story 7. I was going to meet up with someone from Marketplace to buy a phone, and the feeling hit me. So I called the woman, and a man answered, trying to play off the fact he's a man, and I passed by where we were meeting at, and it was dark, and I heard voices in the background on the phone call. I never stopped the car and kept going. Pretty sure I saved myself from, at the very least, a mugging, but learned a good lesson. Always meet in a public place. Story 8. In 2004, on Boxing Day, not me but my mother, family trip including all cousins and extended family on my dad's side to visit the coastal south of Sri Lanka, on vacation, about 20 people in all. Well-planned trip. Last moment, my mother didn't want to go. No reason at all. None of us could get her to explain why, but she refused to go. So we went inland on a different trip to see some other relatives. Around midday, the entire extended family, now on both sides, were sitting shocked in front of the television, watching the very same hotel we booked being washed away live by the tsunami. To date, she still can't explain what she felt. Story 9. Not me, but my mother, saved my grandfather's life when he had a stroke in his chair in their living room. We had all started to walk around the development when my mother, after about 50 to 75 meters from the house, said, I'm going to go back and check on Dad. I went with her and I nearly witnessed my grandfather die. He was on the chair, conscious, but unable to move or talk, just looking at my mother with bulging eyes. She called 911 once, then twice when she felt that they were running late. Ambulance came, got him on the stretcher, but it was too wide to fit out the door. We ended up tearing the door frame off to get him out. Because he was conscious, he actually remembers the ride to the hospital. He told us later that he heard the driver or someone say, there is not a chance that this guy lives. That was when I was around 5 to 6 years old. He is still alive to this day, more than a decade later. At my mother's funeral, part of his speech was about how, without my mother's action, he would not have been able to spend time with her during her final years of life. And for that, he is eternally grateful. Story 10. It didn't save me, but saved a friend. A big group of friends and I were walking home from an event in a town we weren't used to. It was night and hardly anyone was around. Empty streets and all that. We were walking down a sidewalk that had high fences next to it, so when you turned a corner, whatever was around it was out of sight. One of the girls fell behind, distracted by her phone, I think. And I noticed, so I started drifting behind as well, to become a sort of midway point between her and the group. Soon, we were nearing where we were staying, and our group rounded a corner, then started making their way into the yard where our living quarters were. I saw a car drive past us, then turn the corner down the street the girl was still on. As soon as I saw it, I suddenly got this suspicious, awful feeling. So I stopped and went back to the corner to keep an eye on the friend. The car drove past her, stopped, did a complete U-turn, and slowly started creeping up behind alongside her. She was still on her phone and wasn't noticing a thing. I stepped out from behind the corner and started walking towards her. The car sped off quickly as soon as the driver saw me. It scares me that someone could have grabbed her and none of us would have seen a thing. It would have just been one of those cliche movie moments where you turn around and realize a member of the group is missing. To compound that potential tragedy, she'd just gotten engaged a few weeks prior. I think the fact that we had worked with some safe houses in the area that discussed human trafficking probably aided in me being on high alert. And the area we were in was known for that sort of thing. Story 11. I was 15 years old and my mom dropped me off at McDonald's to get breakfast while she went across the street to get Starbucks. It was a shopping mall in suburbia, and we were on the way to pick up a new kitten a few hours away. Instead of walking the 100 yards to my mom, I sat outside waiting for her to pick me up. Teenagers, I guess. As I'm standing there, a guy in an old station wagon with 2 kids in the back starts talking to me. He asks me where I'm going, and I say whatever town it was. He says he's going there too with his kids and asks if I want to come. I tell him no, that my mom is across the street, and he comes closer. My gut is saying something is off, so I see a random woman walk out of Starbucks, and I point to her and say, "That's my mom right there." He freaked out and left really quick. I still remember those two kids in the back seat. They looked so off. I wonder to this day if they are okay. Story 12. Not mine, but my dad's. I was downstairs helping him with some woodworking. He went to run a 2x4 through the table saw when he noticed I was at his elbow rather than behind him. He stopped and told me to never stand behind a board when it's going through the saw in case it gets thrown. I thought he was being overly cautious, and I didn't have as good of a view from behind him. But whatever, I got behind him. He flipped on the saw and ran the board through. He only got 1/3 of the way through, though, when the blade hit a knot and flung the 2x4 hard enough to crash against the wall 10 feet behind. If I hadn't moved, it would have hit me square in the chest. Story 13. I was an unpopular kid and I always wanted to go on sleepovers, but it rarely happened. In 6th or 7th grade, I get invited to this girl's house for a birthday party. I am friendly with her, but not close. I go to her house and I feel weird right away. Her mom and stepdad were sitting in the living room smoking, but being perfectly friendly. The whole night, I couldn't shake this feeling of oppressiveness, despair, and danger. I spent the evening keeping my guard up and keeping an eye out for the entire family, without any idea why. At night, the girl begs me to spend the night. Even though it hurt to say no when I could tell she was desperate, I lied and told her my parents wouldn't let me, when they said over the phone they would. A couple of months later, a student told me she had left the school and moved because her stepfather would hit her. I think of her often and hope she wasn't hurt that night, and hope she's doing better. But I'm glad I got out story 14. My dad had to go to court to settle a way overdue payment for the place he worked at. He was going to take me with him so I can be more exposed to the adult world, so to speak. However, that meant he would have to leave the office back door unlocked so the rest of the staff could clock in. He suddenly didn't feel right about it and decided to have me man the office instead. He got T-boned outside the courthouse on the passenger side of the car that day. The car was totaled, and I would have gotten severely hurt if I was there. Story 15. Saw a mannequin ominously placed by the trash in a dark alley. Almost walked away, but decided to check it out because something felt really off. Turned out to be a girl who had OD'd. Two friends and I were filming a music video and got back to our friend's house around midnight. As we're walking in his back door, I see the mannequin laying by the trash can. I honestly thought it was a prank at first because the alley was completely dark and the mannequin was laying perfectly under the one light in the alley. I decide to check it out and my two friends come with. As we get closer, we realize that it's a girl, probably just passed out drunk because there's a bunch of crap bars in the area. My one friend shakes her. After a few shakes, she comes to and has this absolutely wild, animal-like look in her eyes. She hops to her feet, thrashes at us a bit before taking off down the dark alley. She's understandably afraid because she just came to in a dark alley with 3 dudes hovering over her. As she makes her way down the alley, we try to tail her while giving her space because she's acting wild. I want to call the cops. My one friend wants to help her, but not call the cops and get her in trouble. And my third friend wants to leave her, figuring she's just drunk and headed home. While arguing about what to do, keeping our distance so we don't freak her out, we actually lose track of her but find her phone in the middle of the alley. It's got hundreds of missed calls. It starts ringing, so we answer it, and it's an extremely and understandably upset friend who says everyone has been trying to get a hold of her. She says she's not in the state, but says she will call her mom and have her call us in a minute. A minute later, the mom calls and tells us that her daughter went missing earlier that night. She is eerily calm and nonchalant about the whole thing and says something to the effect of, "Oh, she had her wisdom teeth out earlier that day and is probably just messed up from the meds." She says not to worry about the cops. She'll handle them, and her boyfriend will be by shortly to grab the phone. About 10 minutes later, the mom and the boyfriend show up with flashlights, grab the phone and all the info we have, make a few weird jokes, and go off down the alley. The whole thing was weird, but we figure they're not worried, so we go on about our night feeling uneasy. The next day, my buddy calls me and says the mom showed back up at his house, has a full-on breakdown in his living room. Tells him that they found her down the road a few minutes after we met with them. Turns out she had downed almost a whole bottle of vodka and every pill she could find in the house. They had to pump her stomach, and the doctors said if we hadn't found her, and she would have been dead before morning. The mother then hugs my friend, gives him an envelope, and leave. The envelope had $1,000 in it. Luckily, we had exchanged addresses with the mother earlier, so my buddy went and slipped the money back under her door. I say, I don't know if she made it, because even though she got saved that time, I think about her a lot and truly hope she's doing okay. Story 16. A guy definitely roofied my drink at a bar. He was totally mild-mannered and not creepy at all. Asked me how to sign up for karaoke and pick a song, sat beside me and talked casually, didn't touch me once. But then he pointed to something behind my head to distract me. I looked away and looked back at him, and he was looking away from me into the crowd of people. It was a very stupid way to distract someone, to point and then act like you didn't do anything as opposed to pretending to have thought you saw something. Then I saw him screwing one of those little canisters back shut on his keychain. I asked him what he kept in there to call him out. He was cold and expressionless as he began to slowly twist it back open and said there was nothing in there. I stopped drinking my drink and he performed his song. Then I sang and he took off immediately after, and it was really ducked up, and I'm glad he wasn't very smooth or IDK what could have happened. What always freaked me out was how normal he seemed before he became suddenly cold and robotic when I called him out on that canister thing. But it made me realize, of course, an abuser would seem normal. That's how they get close enough to you to attack you. Story 17. I was president of a club, and a guy who'd recently joined just set off my alarm bells, but he never did anything wrong. I still couldn't shake the feeling he was off. I asked my best friend, a pretty burly guy, to just keep an eye on him during a conference we went to. Most of the club, minus me, went to a party at the conference. My best friend kept an eye on the weird guy for most of the night and ended up stopping him from abusing a passed-out drunk girl. I pretty much always trust my gut feelings now. Story 18. I was falling asleep in the car. My friend was driving. All of a sudden, he stops talking, and I think to myself, what the heck? Something's not right. I open my eyes and turn over. Dude was having a seizure. His legs were stiff as duck, and his foot was on the gas. We were going downhill towards a busy intersection. We had the red, so I slammed the car in park and pulled the keys out. Car starts rattling, making a weird noise, but it gained so much momentum it was still rolling down. So I grabbed the steering wheel and veered us off the road into the side of an abandoned building. I opened his door and climbed over him. I was able to get him out and turn him on his side. The police officer that showed up was like, "You couldn't have done this in a safer fashion?" I just said sorry, but inside I was like, "Duck you." Story 19. It wasn't mine, but my boss, actually. It was any old day at work. It was about to be dinner rush, and I was tired. As usual, I was going to go to the dollar store to get some Red Bull. I asked my manager if he wanted to split it, because they were 2 for $5. He said no, but as soon as I reached the door, he said, "Wait." I asked him what was wrong, and he said I should go later. He didn't give me a reason, and we're pretty relaxed, so I told him to piss off, and as soon as I push the door outwards, I hear a sound I can't even describe, aside from just breaking. Whatever it was broken, that's all I knew. Turns out, an SUV drove straight into that dollar store's front door and their Red Bull fridge. My manager has annoyed me like that a million times, but I'll never forget the time he saved my life with his B Story 20. Not my gut feeling, but my sister once came back home when she'd already left to go to school 10 minutes earlier because she suspected something was wrong. Prevented me from attempting to pass. Story 21. When I was young, I lived 3 blocks from a convenience store. It was the early 90s. My best friend and I convinced our parents to let us walk to the store alone to get some snacks. Important to add that the 2 blocks closest to the store are connected. But the 3rd block we lived on was its own unconnected neighborhood. So anyway, as we are walking back from the store, we are coming up to the 1st street, and a truck drives by and stops on the side of the road in between the 1st and 2nd block on our side of the road. I stopped and told my friend that we should go down the 1st street and go through the neighborhood, come back out the 2nd street, and then head to our 3rd street to avoid the truck. She thought I was being stupid, but I refused to keep walking on the main street, so she followed me down the 1st road. We are now in the 1st neighborhood and about halfway between the 1st and 2nd street when we see the truck slowly driving down the 2nd street into the neighborhood. The driver sees us and immediately slams on the gas and turns his truck towards us on the street. We ran and hid in some bushes further into the neighborhood about 10 minutes. We heard the truck driving by back and forth for about the first 5, and then it was quiet, so we started making our way out of the neighborhood towards the 2nd street again. Suddenly, here comes the truck again slowly, sees us, and guns it towards us again. We jumped over a fence into a backyard and started pounding on the back door. By the way, this is a Tuesday, middle of the day during summer vacation. Most people are at work, but miraculously, a man and woman opened the door and let us in. The woman had just had a baby like a week before, so they were home on leave. They called the cops and my mom, and the man went outside. He said the truck drove by, and the man saw him standing outside and sped out of the neighborhood. Cops and my mom showed up minutes later, and we gave a description and never heard anything about it again. Our parents just drove us to the convenience store from then on. My mom still talks about it to this day and how shocked she was that I had such a strong intuition at that age. Story 22. I had gone to this bar back home with a few friends, and afterwards everyone was supposed to go to this house party. I was game to go from the moment I was invited. Halfway through the night, I had this gut feeling to not go. I told my best friend that she shouldn't go, but she insisted that she wanted to go because there were a few cute guys there. I couldn't shake the feeling that we shouldn't go, but she talked me into it. When we got in my car to head to the party, the guy feeling was worse. I grew up around cars and drive a manual. My best friend is completely clueless when it comes to cars, so I deliberately grinded the gears and jerked the car and made it stall, acting like something was wrong. I pretended to try to fix what wasn't broken, and after about 15 to 20 minutes of fixing my car, Cops and fire trucks followed by EMS flew by us. I fixed my car, but told my best friend that I just wasn't feeling well. And she agreed and said my car breaking down ruined her mood, so we went back to my place to watch movies. About an hour after getting home, we got a call from a friend of ours saying that the girl who owned the house and who was throwing the party was cheating on her husband, who was deployed and came back in leave to surprise her and caught her in bed with his buddy. Dude pulled a gun and hit this girl and his friend while everyone else fled the house. Story 23. I was in the Amazon as the end to a 3-month solo trip around Latin America. Wanted to enjoy one last walk through the jungle and before leaving, so left my jungle lodge around 8 a.m. to walk down to a small river nearby. I stop and close my eyes to listen to the sounds as the jungle is super loud with crickets, birds, insects, etc. Almost immediately, I got a weird feeling and felt really uncomfortable, which was weird because up until then, I'd only felt peaceful and happy. When I opened my eyes, I realized everything had gone completely quiet, which was definitely not normal and not something I'd experienced in other rainforests I'd been to. It was bizarre. I immediately felt that I had to leave and fast. After I dipped and got back to the jungle lodge, I told the tour guide what happened and he said, "It usually only gets quiet when there's a big predator close by. Thanks, but no thanks." I was staying with a tour group in a jungle lodge in the Peruvian Amazon. Next to the lodges, there was a path that led down to a river about a 5-minute walk, where we were told we could go down to swim. Previously, our guides had given us some free time in between tours to allow us to go down unaccompanied by them, so I assumed it was fairly safe. They also said in the years the lodge had been running, they had never seen a big cat around there because they are usually shy and the activity in the lodges generally keeps them away. I took this walk around 8 a.m. on the last day just to listen to the sounds one last time, as it was the end of an amazing 3-month trip, and the jungle had been my favorite part. I had only been walking for around 2 minutes before I decided to stop to take in the sounds and say goodbye, because we would be leaving shortly after. I definitely wasn't wandering off looking to do my own exploration. I had already spent an incredible and guided week there. In regards to the comments about why insects would stop for a predator, the answer is that I don't know. I'm just describing how it felt at the time. The birds, monkeys, and crickets around me definitely stopped to a point of quiet that is alarming considering how loud the jungle usually. But I'm in no way saying every single living thing in the entire Amazon stood still. And then when I explained to the guide what happened, that's just what he told me. Story 24. I used to never wear my seatbelt. This was before they were annoying as duck if you didn't put it on. One time I was sitting in the passenger seat of a car and had a gut feeling to put it on. Not even a minute later, we were hit by someone doing about 60 miles per hour. Cop said if I didn't have on my seatbelt, I would have went through the windshield. I always wear my seatbelt now. Story 25. One time when my little sister and I wandered off in Superstore, a strange man was standing behind us in the toy aisle, and I was getting super weird vibes about him, and he also looked super shady. He had a big hoodie, dark sunglasses, you name it, just screaming serial offender. So obviously my first thought was to just move away from him because we could just look at different toys anyway. Nope, apparently not. He just kept following us, but maintaining a small distance at the same time, and eventually I whispered to my sister that a man was following, and we started walking in circles around different aisles to lose him until we found our dad. I remember how he looked at us one last time before walking away. I was scared of strangers for a while after that, even though I was really outgoing as a kid. I was afraid he'd followed us home for some reason. And looking back on it now, he could have been trying to snatch us or something, but maybe he just wanted to help. But I'm pretty sure there was something wrong with him. Story 26. This isn't my story, it's from an old high school teacher of mine. His friends were bar hopping, traveling to a bar about 45 minutes away. It wasn't like this is the first time they were doing this or anything. All of a sudden, he got a really bad feeling and started panicking. His friends made fun of him and wouldn't let him out of the car, but it got so bad they had to dump him in this small town in the middle of nowhere. He used a payphone and called a cab home. The next morning, he saw that his friends had been in a car accident, obviously due to drunk driving. Most of the friends died. One survived with a severe brain injury. His life was saved, all because of a gut feeling. Sometimes he has survivor's guilt now. Story 27. Last year, December 1st, I had slept for almost a week trying to fight what I thought was the flu. Woke up and that exact gut feeling kept on telling me, something's not right with me. Called the parents to tell them, and then cabbed myself to the emergency room. Took blood, the whole 9 yards. Was there for 8 hours. Discharged and sent home. Called the next morning asking me to come back because they found something in my blood. Bacteremia and endocarditis. I was put on penicillin immediately for 2 months. More tests, more things wrong. Went for a specialized test on December 21st. Woke up to them telling me I need surgery as soon as possible. They're trying to find a surgical team. Earliest is the 24th. I go in and while they're operating, I have an ascending aortic aneurysm and it caused an aortic dissection. They're able to fix it. I've got a synthetic valve in there now. Here's the kicker. I work in a restaurant kitchen. just before the start of the holiday season. Normally, most cooks would tough it out and just work. Most think, it happens, and it'll get better soon. Just keep going. There was just something about the way I was feeling this time that made me go to the hospital. I'm told that if I had done that, I more than likely would have died before my birthday, and they would have found out about the aneurysm during the autopsy. That still sends ducking chills down my spine. My best friend works as an emergency room nurse at the same hospital that I was operated on, and she was freaking out internally, but kept it together on the outside for me. She explained just how serious this all was after I was in recovery. I've promised to tell her whenever I get that same feeling again. Story 28. I was driving and it started to snow. I noticed that I was going a bit fast and strongly sensed I should slow down. I did, and a couple seconds later I came up around a bend with the road suddenly being covered in ice. I started to fishtail while sliding directly towards two people standing outside their car. They had wrecked in the same manner that I was about to do and were standing outside their car, with me heading straight for them. I quickly thought of my options and ended up doing a hard right straight into the highway barrier. I slid nearly 100 plus feet, dragging the front of my car to slow it down. Because I had decided to slow down, I was able to give the two guys enough time to get out of the way before I slammed into their cars. Even though I totaled my car, which was sad, I did not end up killing two people that night. The police did not end up ticketing anyone, thankfully, and they finally sanded the road after we had all wrecked. Snow while driving still scares me to this day. Story 29. I was learning violin from an instructor at my local music shop. I got the weirdest feeling from him, even though he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I wanted to vomit every time I looked at him, especially his hands. After 4 lessons, I told my parents that I had a terrible feeling about him and I never wanted to go back. Luckily, they listened and didn't make me ever go to him again. A few years later, he was arrested for abuse. I have no idea how I knew something was off. He never did or said anything, but I just felt it. Story 30. A few years ago, my friend and I decided to go to Turkey. It was our first time really traveling on our own without a group, and we decided to walk around the square outside of the Blue Mosque. We felt very safe during the day and decided to see the city at night with the lights. As we were in the square, we were hounded by typical store owners trying to sell us something. Finally, most went away, and as we were going back to our hotel, a younger guy approached us. He said he had a shop on the corner, which he pointed to with lots of souvenirs, including carpets. I grew up with a lot of handmade woven carpets from my parents' travels to the Middle East and Asia. I decided it would be a nice gift. So we follow him. When we get to what we thought was his shop, we stopped. We started to walk in and he said, "Not that one, the one around the corner." We poke our head around and sure enough see a store, only selling carpets. I started to get a slightly strange feeling, but nothing overwhelming, so we followed him as we could see the store. When we walked in, about 13 to 15 other men were in the shop. They were pointing out carpets and showing us around, and I started to get really uncomfortable. My friend seemed completely at ease, so we followed the group around the bend to the other part of the store. In Turkey, it is common to be offered tea, so that part is not particularly odd, but the men who were now circling were insistent that we have tea with them in the basement. I kept saying no, but they were leading us towards steps, completely surrounded. We got to the steps and my friend started walking down. My body began to sweat, my heart went crazy, and I never had such an overwhelming fear. I kept trying to think of how we could overpower these men. I grabbed my phone, stopped in my tracks, and gasped. "Friend's name. We need to go right now." My mom just texted me asking why we aren't back at the hotel yet, because the map shows we're at this store. We're supposed to FaceTime with them in 10 minutes. The men kind of look around and tell us we can have tea in less than that amount of time. I keep insisting that my parents are freaking out because they can tell we're in the carpet store and not the hotel, and that they will likely contact the embassy if we don't get going. They continued blocking the staircase. I told them that we would come for tea in the morning as I still really wanted a carpet and that we needed to get out of the store and back to FaceTime. It took a little persuading, but they eventually opened a path for us to go to the door. One of them followed us back to the square, insisting that we return/come back and see them. Of course, we didn't. I have no idea if they were completely harmless or not, but I'd never had such an overwhelming feeling. They easily could have hired us, placed us in carpets, and taken us out. My parents didn't actually have our location as my phone was on airplane mode. So who actually knows, on the other hand, I might have been paranoid, but it wasn't a situation I ever wanted to be in again. Once we were back at the hotel, she told me she was really scared too, but that she thought I was fine, so she went with it. Story 31. A few years back, I went to UNI in Brussels. I would always take the train to get there. One morning, I just woke up and didn't feel great at all. Keep in mind, I have had a horrible flare-up of Crohn's for the last weeks, but this felt different. Guess it was my gut. So instead of pushing through it like I did with Crohn's, I decided to stay home for once. This was the only day out of 2 that I ever stayed home from uni. That day, the terror attack happened on the train that I usually ride to get to uni. Story 32. I had an important meeting in another city. I fly a lot, but I had a nagging feeling about the 3-hour flight I needed to take to get to the meeting. 2 nights in a row before the flight, I dreamt that the right engine would flame out, causing the plane to crash. In the morning, I dawdled enough that I missed flight CP414. The plane made it just fine and I got fired. Got a better job 2 weeks later, so my gut feeling saved me. Story 33. My boyfriend and I were visiting friends for a week in Phoenix. We girls were lounging at the pool while the guys were flexing their grilling skills. My boyfriend paused a moment, stood very still, then told me to go get dressed. We had to go, right now. I wanted to fuss, but something told me not to. We drove straight through to San Antonio, right to his parents' very rural house, before cell phones, and they didn't have a landline within a half mile. Seconds before we arrived, his little sister had jumped off of a rain barrel and landed on a metal spike that hurt her foot and into her leg. His dad was at work, so there was no car available there. She was bleeding like crazy, and his mother had just walked out and found her. I don't know what spoke to him in Phoenix, but it would have been all bad if we had not arrived exactly when we did. Circa 1983, my boyfriend and I had an apartment together. He worked, I didn't. Every day I packed a nice lunch for him and made a good dinner. One afternoon, nothing out of the ordinary. I was laying out at the complex pool and an older guy walked over to introduce himself. He wasn't hitting on me. He had just moved into town and was new to the complex. We chatted for 3 or 4 minutes when my boyfriend showed up at the pool. Odd, but okay. Introductions then, we returned to the apartment for lunch. Once behind the door of the apartment, he said to me, "Stay away from that guy. There's something very bad about him. He feels like the bottom of the deepest ocean." In fact, the reason he came home during his lunch was that he had a feeling which he had before I was even at the pool. He just sensed something bad and came home. After he returned to work, I was taking the kitchen trash out and the man approached me again. I'm former Army and in pretty good shape, and he's older. No place in his swimsuit for a weapon, and I could probably take him, plus it wasn't in a secluded place. I'm not afraid. He asked me if my boyfriend was psychic. As it turns out, this guy is psychic and in fact recently transferred to San Antonio from a sister radio station to do his show there. He told me that when two psychics meet, oftentimes they feel something like cold darkness because they are receptive of vibes instead, emitting like most people. In the end, he guided my boyfriend to better understand the things he sensed, and they became great friends. Story 34. So, it technically didn't save me, it would have. Anyway, we went on family vacation to visit my dad's side of the family. They lived a state away. My mom was about 6 months pregnant with my only baby brother at the time. We got to our hotel at about 2 o'clock, and by 3 o'clock, we decided we wanted to make the most of the day and go to the aquarium. I got fully dressed and ready to go, and suddenly I was hit with this crippling feeling of dread. At that age, I'd never experienced anything like it. Pure anxiety. But I just ducking knew if we waited 5 minutes, I would be fine. I tried telling my mom this, and she was having none of it. I even tried to just stall her by begging. Got dragged, not literally, out of the hotel and into the car. We pull out of the parking lot and get T-boned so hard, we do a 180 into oncoming traffic. As soon as we all realized we were okay, I was like, yep, there it is. I've never let either of them forget it either. Story 35, I was hanging out with friends at a bar, but then going to head to my friends to stay the night. We drove separately though. It was in a city with a super high crime rate and in an even rougher part of town. We left the bar at like 3 a.m. and the drive wasn't far, but I was really low on gas and wasn't sure if I was gonna make it. I'm not normally a person who's paranoid over city/neighborhood crime rates. And I spent like half my time in this city and in the area we were in anyway, so it wasn't foreign to me by any means. Even so, just to be on the safe side, I picked a gas station that was well lit and at a relatively busy intersection. I was the only car at the gas station, and when I pulled up to the pump, I luckily took a moment to text my friend that I'd catch up with him in a few minutes. As I'm doing that though, another car pulls up right on the other side of the pump that I was at. I have no idea what made me pause, but I just waited a second to let them get out first. But I had to keep waiting because they weren't getting out. At first, I thought that maybe they were taking a moment to get their wallet, text someone, just doing something. I couldn't see through the window tint at all though, but I also tried to not stare at them or make it super obvious. I'm also not a very intimidating guy. I waited it out for 5 minutes and then started getting more worried. I texted my friend to tell him exactly where I was. I couldn't leave because I didn't have enough gas to get anywhere else, and I didn't want to just drive to my friend's place in the event that they followed me. Another 10 minutes later, the car pulled off. No one ever got out to get gas, including me. I just headed to my friend's and decided to risk getting there on what I had left in my tank. I'm not sure what made me that paranoid in that moment, but I'm really ducking glad I hesitated. Story 36. I woke up from a deep sleep at like 2 a.m. during a winter storm. Something wasn't right. I immediately went looking for my senior dog and couldn't find her anywhere in the house. My roommates had a tendency to let her out for a walk and forget about her, closing the door. I ran to the front of the house and found her laying on the welcome mat. She was hardly breathing and covered in snow. She had been outside alone for at the very least 5 hours. I moved out shortly after. Story 37. Not quite sure if it was a gut feeling, but kinda close. It was Christmas Eve night in my childhood house. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And my mom had gotten a large TV for my dad and hid it in my doorless closet along with some other presents. At one point in the night, she had come back into my room to retrieve one of the smaller items and ended up moving the TV right in front of my wall heater and didn't put it back. I didn't notice and went to sleep a little later. I don't know if it was the smell or a gut instinct, but thank God I woke up, because that night/early the next morning, I woke up to find my room filling with smoke and a nice orange glow coming from the back of the TV box. Luckily, no large flames had formed yet, and I was able to stop it simply by moving the box out of the way, and of course turned off the heater and evacuated the room. The smoke wasn't super bad, so the house didn't get too much, and my room eventually stopped smelling of it. Story 38, my mother's moment, technically. She called me late one night apropos of nothing, after we hadn't spoken in about a month. We chatted for a few minutes before I told her I'd just taken a load of pills with the intent to end my life just before she called. She phoned an ambulance and, I'm still here. Story 39, when I was 18 in my first year of college, I was walking into a convenience store and two girls popped out of a car to ask me to buy them cigarettes. I said sure, took their money in order, and as I was walking in, a bald 40-something guy wearing a button-down shirt walked out. I immediately was thinking that guy's a cop. I bought for me and the girls and asked the clerk straight up if that guy was a cop. Clerk confirmed it for me. So I walked out, told the girls to meet me across the street, and walked back to my dorm. Across the street, I saw the cop creeping behind a building in his unmarked Crown Victoria, and so I walked right back into my dorm without waiting for trap. The whole thing was a sting set up outside a dorm to catch college freshmen buying cigs for people a year younger than them. Such a waste of time. The girls were in on it. The clerk knew, but had no choice. And because of my hunch and his confirmation, I walked right out of it with 2 free packs of smokes. Story 40. I don't know if it saved me, but years ago, at the time, had a coworker that kept inviting us out to drink. I had never met the guy and was wondering why he seemed so eager to meet me, especially since I wasn't even old enough to drink at the time. He eventually told my ex that we should come over to his place for drinks in order for me to partake. I remember around this time, creeping his FB and seeing the squirrely guy posing in front of his Honda. Something about it all made me laugh and wonder, why does this 20-something-year-old want to go to such lengths to hang out with a girl he knows is taken? A couple of years later, he is arrested on a multitude of CP cherry on top. Local Star Cop son, Story 41. I went out with my best friend on New Year's last year and were having drinks with her friends when I realized I was out of cigarettes. I left for a few minutes to walk over and grab a pack and ended up talking to a homeless guy for a while. And when I went over to the entrance of the bar, she was outside and said something mean to me for no reason and walked off. I was confused, so I decided it would be good if I took a walk to let her cool off and then figure out what she was upset about. I was going to walk down the street for a bit, but something told me to turn left, walking behind the bar, and then turning to the side of the bar when I see a girl laying down on the sidewalk and people walking by her. As I'm walking over to help, I realize it's my friend and she's not very conscious. She was probably high while I was getting smokes, and who knows what would have happened if I hadn't decided to go. That way, scares the crap out of me. Story 42. I was walking to the barber shop, and for some reason, everything just felt off. I ignored the feeling, but every step I took just made me feel like something wasn't right, so I decided to just go grab some food and come back. While I was eating, I saw police cars, ambulances driving to around where I was before. It turns out there was a murder. Now I always listen to my gut feeling. Story 43. It didn't save me, but I saved someone else. I would go to my grandma's house while our mom worked late some nights. Anyway, one day I was just randomly thinking about fire alarm. I don't know what caused me to think about it, but after I started, I couldn't stop. I have ADHD and this super focus thing, so whenever I'm thinking about something as simple as fire alarms, it consumes my mind. I asked my grandma and she said she hadn't tested hers in a while. Just for kicks she did, and sure enough, the batters were dead. She replaced the batters and made sure they worked. The very next morning, her house caught on fire while she was asleep. If she didn't hear the fire alarms, she would have been trapped in her room on the 2nd story without a phone or any way to contact help. She most likely would have died. I always make sure fire detectors, alarms work in my house now. Story 44. A little over a year ago, I matched with this guy on Tinder. He was a great-looking guy. We chatted for a couple weeks and I couldn't put my finger on it, but something just didn't feel right, so I just stopped texting one day. A couple of weeks went by and he messaged me to say hi. I ended up looking through the previous messages to try to remember why I stopped texting. I couldn't pinpoint a single reason. He seemed fine. I thought maybe I was just having a bad day. So I asked him out. We went out a couple of nights later. I didn't really find a connection with him in person. He seemed like a nice guy and all, and he was as good looking in person as he is in pictures. But he just jibber-jabbered about topics instead of trying to have a meaningful conversation. Annoying and not my thing, but harmless. So we get to the end of the date, and I decided to get coffee at his place. No future for a relationship, but maybe he's good in bed, We were making out on the couch a bit, and suddenly that feeling hit me again. He was on top of me, but not even pressing down on me that hard, but for some reason it just felt so oppressive and scary. I told him I needed to get home and left. He was definitely annoyed, but let me leave without a fight. I got in the car, and as soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, he was texting me. I texted back as much as I could while driving, like at stoplights and crap. I assured him it was me and not him, and he's a great guy, blah blah blah. He just kept texting. I started ignoring them because I can't text and ducking drive in the dark and the rain. So he starts calling me. I answered, and he started giving me a lecture about how unprofessional what I just did was. He started out calm, then just kept getting angrier and angrier. I hung up on him. I don't have time for that crap. Dude, texts and calls all night long. It was terrifying. He slowed down in the late morning hours. I think he finally got a little sleep, then started up again and continued on for the better part of a week. I reported him to Tinder and was seriously looking up the process for getting a restraining order. He finally just stopped on his own. And this is why I use a fake name on Tinder and listen when my gut tells me something. Story 45. I was walking out of a grocery store when I saw this kid about to cross the road. Something came over me and I yanked him back onto the sidewalk. Not even a second later, a truck came flying past. Story 46. I was with a coworker. He had lied to me about going to a family party of his, but when I showed up, it was just him and I, and we went to a bar. I rolled my eyes and just thought I could clench my teeth through it. He knew the owner of the bar and got me alcoholic drinks. I was only 20. I started pouring out the drinks when the dude was shooting pool because I didn't want to be tipsy/drunk while dealing with him. That decision honestly saved me. I told him I wanted to go home, but he talked me into taking him home first. So I followed the directions he gave me and I pulled into a hookah bar parking lot instead. He started getting really aggressive and trying to kiss me. I kept pushing him off. I was still trying to be polite but firm and telling him to stop. That's when I noticed the group of guys around my car talking to my coworker in my car in another language. He then opened my car door, got out, and proceeded to grab me by the hair to try to pull me out of my car, the other guys gathering around. I had the mind to lock my door when I noticed the other guys. I also had put my car in reverse, so when he grabbed my hair, I let off the brake, and my car started rolling back so he let go of me. It was terrifying. I told our boss the next day, and he quit when our boss asked him about it. I even drove away with my passenger door wide open. I didn't stop to close it until I was several miles away, and even then I was super paranoid. Story 47. There's a very fun road that gets you from Niederndorf to Vasch or back in Germany. You can go 60 or 70 clicks kph along smooth, tight turns and little rolling hills. All around it, for acres and acres, are fields of whatever's in season and no intersections for several kilometers. It's a very fun road to go too fast on. This day, something like wheat was in and it was high. I couldn't see around the corners, but I knew the road well and was staying in my lane, and I was going fast and smiling. About halfway in, I heard a voice in my head as clear as if the speaker were sitting next to me, and it said, "You need to slow down." It was startling, and I braked immediately. 2 seconds later, I come through one of the turns and into the ass end of a combine, taking up both lanes and moving slowly. I barely stopped in time. Those extra 2 seconds of brake time saved a Volvo at least, but I'm pretty sure they saved my life too. Story 48. When I was in college, I lived in a sketchy part of Chicago, Humboldt Park, Logan Square, before gentrification. I liked to take late-night strolls, even when I was living in that neighborhood as a 20-year-old woman. Yeah, I know, pretty dumb of me. One night, I was feeling stressed out, so I embarked on one of my late-night strolls. I was walking along a somewhat busy road. Cars were zooming past me. Pretty normal. I wasn't paying much attention because I was too wrapped up in whatever was stressing me out that night. Suddenly, a chill shot up my spine. Hypervigilance washed over me, and I became more alert than I had ever been. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. I quickly spotted a car. It was driving in the opposite direction, a little slower than usual. It was too dark for me to see anyone inside the car, and the car was pretty unassuming, but I still knew something was off. They were watching me. I just knew. The car drove past me and then made a U-turn. Now it was right behind me, creeping along the curb. Luckily, there was a Walgreens a few blocks ahead. I started walking faster, and the car eventually sped past me and disappeared into a corner. I somehow knew I wasn't safe yet, so I still sprinted to Walgreens. I told the security guard what happened, and we both went outside. The car was parked up the street, about 50 to 100 feet away. The security guard was a big guy who looked intimidating. He marched toward the car, and the car immediately backed up, made a U-turn, and then booked it out of there. The security guard called the cops, and they drove me home. I never took a late-night stroll again. My gut made me more alert, but it was really the security guard who saved my life. I'm positive that if he wasn't there that night, something bad would have happened to me. I wish I could find that security guard to thank him.